Well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to uh, this is the US EMS community call for October 2016. I apologize, I have the wrong slide up on the screen, but you are in the EMS community call, so my apologies for that. I just want to welcome you. Today you are in a listen-only mode, so just a reminder that if you have any questions during today's call, you can type them in the messages panel down in the lower left-hand portion of your screen, and we will make sure to get that answered for you either with our speaker live or in a private one-to-one chat. This call is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation, so if you do not consent to being a part of a recorded call, you should disconnect now. If you have any questions during today's presentation that we're not able to answer, we will go ahead and post those to our Yammer group after the fact. And the two questions that we always get are, is the call being recorded? Yes, it is. We will post the call recording to our Yammer group shortly after the completion of the call. We also will post the slide deck to that same location, and I will actually post the link to that here in just a moment. There we go. So I just posted the link. You should see that pop up in your messages panel. As we get started today, we're really excited to jump right into our presentation to talk about Microsoft Cloud App Security. This is a fantastic new technology. It's really exciting. And to talk about it today, we've asked one of our global black belts to join us. And Mike Cassis is one of the guys who's had the opportunity to dive in, learn Microsoft Cloud App Security, talks about it with partners and customers on a regular basis, and he's got a really exciting presentation to share with you today. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mike. And Mike, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, pleasure to talk to you today about Cloud App Security. And, the focus of this call is, I would say on the 100, 200, 300, 400 spectrum, we're going to spend most of our time in the 200 to 300 and probably touch the 400. There's a lot of content already out there, especially from our product marketing group around the 100 stuff, value prop, things like that. What I want you to feel comfortable with is the architecture. How does it get deployed on the back end? What's important to know when you go in and start setting this up with a customer? How do you give a good demo, right? Building a good demo environment around this product isn't as simple as just starting it and showing it. It's important to connect it to a lot of other things. So let me start by presenting my desktop here. And Nick, I'll ask you to just confirm for me when you have a chance to see.
It is in the process of loading, and now we can see it.
Perfect. So I start with this slide, and I know that you're probably thinking, wow, all right, this is level 100 stuff. Why are you showing me this? I'm showing you this because our Cloud App Security product, which a lot of times falls into that CASB space or Cloud Access Security Broker space, Microsoft's a little different. We don't solve for all components of what many analysts such as Gartner say should be solved for in the CASB. We actually provide a suite of products that solve for a lot of the CASB functionality in different areas. So this is important to know when you're talking about positioning with a customer, that there are things that CAS does and there's things that it doesn't do, but just because it doesn't do certain things that a customer might expect doesn't mean it's not solved in the rest of the EMS suite. So as we go through this, there are certain items that I will call out later on in the presentation where I say, hey, if a customer mentions these things, don't think, oh, we're toast, right? No, you actually can do things like conditional access, which is a lot of times people expect to be done at the CASB level, can be done in things like Azure Active Directory or Intune. So we'll talk more about that later. But this EMS suite, this is the value prop Microsoft is bringing. CAS is like one leg of this stool, and there's a lot that it can do, but it is not the end all be all. So keep that in mind, right? And there's some great sessions that are available around the overall value prop of the EMS suite. But today we're going to talk 200, 300 on Cloud App Security. So let's get started. I like to always talk first with my customers about architecture, and I do this for really one particular reason, because and actually I'm going to pull up a different deck here. Actually, it'll be easier. I'll just draw a line. Draw. I'll give you a better slide later on. I already gave a better version to Nick to share with you later on, and that answers the question of will you get this content? Yes, you will. So when we talk about CloudApp security, there's inevitably a commingling of two different features that confuses customers, and a lot of times confuses partners and even people here at Microsoft. So I like to show this diagram, and it's great if you get comfortable with it enough that you can actually go into a customer environment and start whiteboarding it, because it tells a much better story. But here's how this is laid out, right? Over on the right side, we have Azure Office 365 and CloudApp Security. CloudApp Security is deployed as a service within Office 365. To turn this thing on is, especially as a trial, incredibly simple. You just have your customer log into their environment as a global administrator, and you just go to portal.office.com/catalog to get to that catalog of services, and you'll find CloudApp Security Trial embedded there. And it's a free 30-day trial to get it spun up, and the customer can be off and running using it in minutes, right? So when we talk about just the broader architecture, keep this in mind, because all of the things that make Office 365 great are inevitably the things that make CloudApp Security great from a security and architecture standpoint, because it is deployed within that environment and ultimately, right, sitting on Azure, Microsoft Azure infrastructure and data centers. So when you talk about the robustness of this product and going up against a lot of our competitors, our back end of this particular product is incredible. So let's talk through a couple scenarios that are addressed by this product. And the first we're going to go through is arguably the more complicated of the two, I would say, and the easiest to kind of screw up when you're positioning with a customer or commingle with things that shouldn't be commingled. So here we have a user that's actually going through a proxy or a firewall on-prem. And I'm going to pull this up here, make it a little bigger for you. Proxy or firewall on-prem with the customer. Now, every time this user is going through the proxy or the firewall, they're going out to the internet and they're accessing a lot of different services. As they're doing that, they're generating transactions in the traffic logs of that proxy or firewall device. CloudApp Security takes those logs and we use them in a special way, and we parse against a database that we maintain internally that we call the SaaSDB, or sometimes you call it the CloudApp Catalog. This is a collection of 13,000 plus applications that contain a myriad of properties, such as security, compliance, and just general information. And those properties are used to generate a risk score. Incredibly powerful database that we maintain. And it's not easy to maintain it, by the way. And I inevitably get the customer question all the time about how do you maintain this database? How do you keep it up to date? All of that stuff. We have a team of analysts that are constantly looking at kind of the most used applications in the market, or the ones that are the most interesting or are causing the most disruption in the market, and they go to work analyzing all the different properties that we maintain. There are some things that they can get just by looking at the site and testing it, but there's other things they need to reach out to the company for or read their terms of service, things like that. And we also supplement that with automated tools. So this is a regularly updated database. This isn't part of the 2-week release cycle of the product, all right? So these proxy or firewalls, there's tons of documentation on this, but I like to show this slide because this proves an important point, right? So each of these devices that we support today, they have a different level of granularity when it comes to the data provided in those logs. So the more yeses you see across the board, the richer the logs, and hence the richer the data will be flowing into CloudApp Security. So for instance, WebSense is a great example of this. We support 2 different WebSense logs. They have the Internet Activity Log and the Investigative Detail Report. Both of these obviously come from a WebSense device, but the Internet Activity Log has target app URL, target app IP, username, origin IP, total traffic, and upload bytes, which means that by taking the delta between these two, we can also get download information. So these last two, having both of these is important because now you can actually separate out how much download, how much upload, versus the versus the investigative detail report. Now we're missing traffic information. We just have the origin IP and the target app URL, which basically means we can say this IP address went to this app, and that's pretty much it, right? So garbage in, garbage out is kind of the term there. you want to push your customers towards getting the richest logs that they have. Obviously, Blue Coat's a big data source for a lot of customers, and even right here, even though we're missing the target app IP, that's not a big deal because the target app URL is a great substitute. By having both, that's kind of gravy, but we need one or the other. So Blue Coat's a great log to do. Cisco Ironport is a great log. I have, and actually this is a sample. There's a sample log that you can go download, and I'll show you where to get that of a Cisco Ironport log. Palo Alto Networks, great log. WebSense, great log. So those are some of the heavy hitters. So you take these logs and you send them either over FTP or syslog to a log collector. Now, what's a log collector? Well, let's take a look. So the log collector is a Linux virtual machine. It's actually running a Ubuntu server, and its sole purpose in life is to receive logs and send logs, okay? And to configure it is incredibly simple. There's two commands. There's the network config command for, you guessed it, configuring networking, and the collector config command that's used to bootstrap the machine and add in the folder structure necessary for receiving the log files. And we'll walk through what that process looks like. Inbound, a lot of times you don't even need to open really much of anything inbound, especially if the device is sitting on the same subnet. But if you are putting your log collector somewhere else that needs to, and you need to get logs to it, these are the typical ports that you would need to open depending on how you're sending the logs to the collector. Outbound 443 is all we require. This is how the logs get sent up. Now, whenever logs are being sent to the log collector over FTP, every time a log gets dropped in, the log collector will instantly recognize it and start to facilitate that upload operation. For syslog, we retain the syslog entries that are being sent to it for roughly 20 minutes, and every 20 minutes we dump those syslog entries to a flat file and upload them to Cloud App Security. So if you're doing a syslog push to the collector, just be aware that it's going to take about 20 minutes before you're actually going to see any evidence on the Cloud App Security side that logs have made its way up into the cloud. Okay. Important note is the log collector doesn't do any parsing or crunching of the data. All of the parsing of the log data happens up in the cloud. So you're not going to run into any resource contention around this stuff. The log collector actually has a theoretic maximum throughput of about 50 gigs per hour of logs. That's pretty significant, I'll be honest. And when we talk about sizing, you can kind of keep that in mind. You can always do a one-to-one relationship, one log collector per device, but you can also do 2 devices per log collector, 3, 4. You can mix and match. Just keep in mind, though, that if there's too much traffic being generated, then entries or files are going to get dropped, okay? So that was the log collector method of getting into the console. Now, the log collector is, as far as I'm concerned, the most complicated part of this product because it requires that you deploy a VM and obviously go through the change request to get that done, make sure that firewall rules are appropriately set, blah, blah, blah. Everything else is all cloud-based. When we talk about running a customer through a POC, the log collector is really kind of phase 3 here. So to get the logs into the console, you can also do it manually. So it's really as simple as going into the console, selecting the drop-down of what's the data source. In this case, we selected Cisco Ironport, and then you choose up to 20 files and up to 1 gig per file, and you can upload them. Now, the downside to doing the manual upload is kind of twofold. One, it's manual, which sucks, but 2, the data that is getting uploaded to Cloud App Security through a manual operation doesn't get commingled with the rest of the data that is being uploaded later. So it basically goes into its own bucket, and it's great, and we call these snapshot reports, by the way. So in the discovery section of Cloud App Security, you can select and look at different snapshot reports, but if you try to create a policy to trigger around discovery data, it doesn't look at snapshot reports. So doing the automated upload is the important part. Now, I have down here just a little bit of PowerShell. There is an exposed API endpoint for doing log uploads. So the log collector makes that very easy. When you dump the logs in, it's actually calling those API endpoints. But if you have a power user customer that wants to script their own uploading of logs, you can certainly do that. And the PowerShell module that I co-authored with Jared Poppelman, another GBB, actually makes that very easy as well. So it's actually a series of 3 operations. There's a get, a put, and a post operation that needs to happen kind of in parallel, or more in sequence, sorry. And we added a function called send-cas discovery log that can be used to upload that. There's information in the deck that will be provided to you around where the wiki is to learn more about the PowerShell module. Just disclaimer, this is an open source project by me and a colleague. This is not formally part of CloudOps Security as a supported product, but it is using supported API endpoints, okay? So that being said, you have a few methods of getting logs into the console. So let's just take a quick peek at the console. And again, I'm getting all the slides out of the way here before we jump into the console. But this is what you'll see. The discovery solution, when you're uploading logs, gets its own dashboard, right? And so based on the logs you upload, you're going to see a certain number of apps that were discovered, certain number of users, IP addresses. Here's the traffic breakdown, okay? There's much more to this than what you're seeing here, but this is what happens. Like the logs get uploaded, they get parsed. We store the parsed data, the raw logs go away, okay? So we get this question a lot too. I want to go look at, some of the logs I uploaded, and the answer is we don't retain the raw logs. We retain the parsed data of those logs. So just kind of keep that in mind. We don't retain any of that particular data, okay? Now, in this scenario, right, what's our data source? This is important. Our data source for this feature in CloudOps Security is the logs, meaning that if a user doesn't go through the proxy or the firewall, we will not see that traffic, okay? Incredibly important. So really this, for the most part, that means that the user needs to be on-premise or on the network at some point, because if they're not going through here, we're not going to see it. Now contrast this, right? Now we're going to pivot away for a second. We're going to talk about the other scenario. If you go to the right, a user going to a SaaS service, specifically a certain subset of SaaS services, not just any, okay? So let's look at these, right? These 8 here are special to CloudOps Security. These are services that have robust APIs, have large market share, okay, and are enterprise grade applications, meaning that they sell enterprise licenses to these products, okay? So Office 365, of course, we support. Box, Dropbox, Google Apps for Work. By the way, Box and Dropbox, these are enterprise grade, not personal Box or Dropbox, okay? Google Apps for Work, ServiceNow, Salesforce, AWS, and Okta. For each of these, we have varying degrees of information that we can retrieve or things that we can do within those applications, okay? And this particular slide, this is based on some information that's available to you on docs.microsoft, but I wanted to put this in here so that you have at least an idea. Anywhere you see a check mark, these are things that we can parse or make available. It's a good representation, but I don't think it's the best table personally. I think it gets the point across, right? But here's the deal, right? Over here, the proxy and the firewall, this was our data source. In this scenario, the SaaS service is our data source. This is important because it no longer matters if the user is on-premise or off-premise, because the user is going to hit the service, and the service is going to send us information, all right? So if we go look, we have API connectors, and these API connectors were purpose-built to retrieve 3 important pieces of information: account information, activity information, and file information from these services. As these flow over, we store the metadata or the descriptive data around these, okay? So what do we mean by the metadata? Well, let's just take a look at a file, for instance. Now, this isn't how it shows up in the console. This is based upon pulling from the APIs. But you can see there's a wealth of information, and this is not all the information. So this is based on a file that was stored in OneDrive. And you can see the file type. You can see some information based on the DLP scans. You can see who the owner is. You can see the file access level. This file is being held private. All right. There's a lot of information. Even the name here, this is the .docx. You can even see the file extension is a docx. Lots of descriptive data around this file. And we get the same level of information around activities, right? Here's an activity of, what was this? Upload file, okay? So this was a file upload activity. and you can see lots of descriptive data around what just happened. And there's information around the user agent string. So what OS were they using? What browser were they using? Where were they coming in from? Okay, what ISP were they using? All of this becomes incredibly important when we talk about commingling this data on the back end for user and entity behavior analytics, or a lot of people like to call that machine learning. So every app you connect into CloudApp Security is generating a lot of file, user, and activity information that we use and bring together to look for anomalies, or more importantly, allow you to create policies to trigger based on thresholds you set. So CAS is a policy-driven engine, so we'll talk more about that when we get in the console. There, you see this piece proxies here. I put a big R on this one. This is roadmap. This is a coming feature that they announced at Ignite. This is incredibly cool stuff, and I will do my very best to leave a few moments at the end to cover this with you. But there's so much content I want to share with you all that it may not happen. But if it doesn't, then we can always do a supplementary session, or I'll do a little write-up to give it to Nick to share with you all. Okay. So that being said, right? What's the key takeaways here? Both of these components are out of band, right? Meaning that we are not impacting the user session. There's no impact to productivity that the user is going to see. Both of these are agentless architectures. That's important as well. Deployment of this is so simple. And while agents provide a much deeper level of visibility, they're also agents, and they're also a pain in the, I can't say it to this, group, right? But they're a pain to deal with and deploy and manage, and we see this from a number of our competitors that I run into who use an agented deployment. And it looks great on paper. When you get running with it, it is very difficult to maintain, and just the user impact is incredibly frustrating, okay? So keep this architecture in mind. I'm going to pivot away from this now, and we're going to actually go look at the console, okay? So there's actually two consoles I'm going to show you today, and here's what's great, right? And actually, I'm going to, slight detour for a second. We always get the question, how do I get my demo environment going? How do I start showing this stuff? As partners, you all have access to demos.microsoft.com. If you're not familiar, you should really get familiar, okay? Microsoft Partner Logins, you can log in here as a partner, and when you log in, you get access to create up to 6 concurrent tenants in Office 365, and inevitably enable the EMS licenses in those, which is great. So CloudApp Security is part of this. So by enabling the EMS demos, you actually are enabling CloudApp Security, which means you'll get your own fresh production-ready tenant that you can start playing with. Now, it's great to a point. And I say that because you have to do some setup work, right? If you don't have time to do a bunch of setup work and actually connect in a bunch of applications, then your demo environment's going to be lacking, right? So what's great about this, and I want to share this with you as well, there's a separate environment that we call the Acme tenant, and it's acme.console-demo.atalon.com. When you create, and by the way, this will be shared with you in the deck, don't worry. When you create a demos.microsoft account, what happens for you is a user gets provisioned in this tenant as well. This is a CAN demo environment, and this is great for showing the basic 100, 200 overview, proving your point. Product marketing uses this a lot, but what you'll see, right, admin at mod for a second, right? What you'll see here, right, these admin at mod accounts, if you're not familiar with demos.microsoft, this is the default account that gets created for you whenever you launch a demos.microsoft instance. This gets auto-provisioned in this environment as well. So what you can do is you can come here and log in with those same credentials into this environment. And so why is this environment special? Well, it's special because it already has a lot of data in there for you to start showing your customers. Here's a look at the Discovery dashboard. It's already maintaining a certain number of apps and users and IPs. You can pivot in and actually start showing what this looks like. This is great, right? But this is not based on real data, okay? This is based upon database entries that are being made on the back end to maintain this special environment, right? And this is very evident when you go and look at files, for instance, and you'll notice that every file is basically 4 random words chunked together. And you'll even see, and this is just kind of a shortcoming of the environment. It's getting better, right? But you'll see files and things and apps that we don't explicitly support via API. And again, this is a shortcoming, right? So here's Jive. This is not supported via API today, but it was back in the Adelom days. This is already being addressed, so don't worry. The idea is this is a great way to show, based on some canned demo environment, and you'll see, you know, they use the @acme.com domain here to show a lot of this. I use a combination of 2 environments whenever I show this product. I use the Acme environment for 2 key things. I use it for discovery data to show the dashboard as I showed you there just momentarily. And I use it to show alerts because they actually have some cool alerts that are generated that I don't have in my own environment. So we'll wrap around to this. I know I'm kind of going off kilter here, but this environment has a really great use from the standpoint of showing some discovery data and some alert data, and the fact that if you don't have the time or the resources to build out your own lab environment, this is a great way to do it. But in order to get access, you first need to go to demos.microsoft. Okay, so let's go back into my environment for a second, and I like to go top to bottom, left to right here. And what I want, you know, obviously an hour isn't enough time to make everyone experts on this thing, but I want you all to be sort of familiar where buttons are, and the only way you're going to get really good is if you just get your hands dirty and start playing with it. That's the only way to do it, right? So let's start with discovery, and there's a reason I'm not starting all the way to the left with the dashboard, because a dashboard's not overly exciting if you don't know what is causing data to be getting in here. So let's actually start with discovery, and then we'll wrap up with the dashboard. So in discovery, this is based upon logs you're uploading. And I mentioned we have something called snapshot reports, and I didn't mention the name continuous reports, but continuous is our term for automated, okay? So if we scroll down a bit, you'll see a couple snapshot reports. Again, you'll notice these are separated out specifically. So if I go click on Blue Coat, this is based on a log I uploaded, this filters down and shows me just the entries that were found in that Blue Coat log I uploaded. Or I go back and I select Global, which is the overall bucket of all the logs I've uploaded for the last 90 days. Notice I said 90 days. Up here, you can filter down by 7, 30, or 90. This is a sliding 90-day window. If you try to upload any logs that are older than 90 days, you will get an error that says entries are too old, right? And let me show you what that error looks like. Troubleshooting discovery is, there's documentation on this, but under the governance log section, under the gear, you'll see all the logs that you attempt to upload. And if you try to upload a log that's too old, you'll get a message like this. All Discover Cloud-related transactions are more than 90 days old. All right, so pretty easy to figure out why something was rejected. But if it is successful, and I apologize for this being relatively small on your screen probably, logs that are successfully parsed, you'll get a successful message, and it'll show you that, you know, the size of that log was, you know, in this case 11 megs, and it was from the Cisco Ironport proxy log type. 9,000 something transactions were found and 515 cloud apps were found, okay? So as logs are flowing in from the log collector, you'll be able to monitor their health right here, okay? So let's pivot back. And I'm going to do a little bit of pivoting here, and I'm going to go fast, but the reason I'm going fast is to show you how easy it is to pivot these discovery reports in such a way that you can really find what you're interested in. So I'm looking at this report, and I say, okay, there's some interesting data. I'm looking at app categories. These are the major app categories we're seeing, and actually I'm going to go into this environment because there's some better data. And I'm curious about app categories broken out by app. I'm only concerned with, I will get rid of my unsanctioned apps, and we'll get rid of my sanctioned apps. I'm only concerned with kind of the other stuff, right? So I see that we have 48 IT service applications. What are those applications? Okay, now we're seeing Azure AD, we're seeing Apple, we're seeing CDW, lots of fun stuff. And I see we have a good chunk of traffic that's flowing in, and we see we have 713 users and 662 IPs. Interesting. So this was given a score of 9. Why was this given a score of 9? because there are 3 buckets that make up this score equally. See, 33% weight, 9 out of 10, 33% weight, 10 out of 10, 33% weight, 9 out of 10. And you might be asking yourself, well, I care more about security than I do about general information. Hey, Mike, is there a way to make these scores reflect what's important to me? Yes, there is, and I'll show you later on how you can customize the weightings. But as we come down, we see a breakdown of why this received the score that it did, right? AES encryption, we're using data at rest, great. We're using TLS 1.2 for the encryption protocol. We support multi-factor authentication. And again, you're looking at the individual categories, the individual properties contributing equally to the overall category. And each of these properties is configurable. And then you might ask yourself, well, I'll pick on this one, right? That's a no. And you say, all right, well, we have a property here called enforced transport encryption that you marked as no. Interesting. Well, and based on my testing, it actually does. So how do I tell CloudApp security guys to fix this in their database? Great question. There's a little pencil here. Click on this, and you can specify that, you know what, this actually was a yes, and, based on my testing, blah, 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 okay? And you click submit. This goes back to our that team of analysts I mentioned earlier in the call for them to go inspect and determine whether or not this actually does need to be changed, right? So you can actually submit updates to any of this stuff, and we expect all of our customers should be aware of this, because we only maintaining this database is incredibly labor intensive, okay? And it's very difficult to have perfect information. So we try to almost crowdsource some of this to supplement the work that our analysts are doing on the back end, okay? Same thing for compliance. So we saw that we had 713 users. Let's go take a quick peek at what went on here. So we dive in and we are looking at Azure AD, and we see these users, the IPs, and each of these, by the way, you can drill into a bit more, but what I want to show you is the traffic patterns. This is cool because we're actually able to see, where our peak times are during the day based on the logs we're uploading. And so we provide you those traffic patterns for each of these. As we come down, we show you the top ranked users who are using this particular service, top download users, IPs. I'm not going to go through every one of these, right? But you can pivot in on any of these particular users and IPs. So what I might want to do is let's go look at the IP addresses that have been accessing this particular service. And we're looking at them by transactions. And I might want to go look at this particular IP. So we pick this particular one. Again, see how I'm pivoting, right? Now I'm seeing this IP in the context of this IP, this many apps in use, this many transactions, and we can go look at the user history. What users have been sharing this particular IP? Because obviously it's not a one-to-one relationship of user to IP address in a lot of cases, right? So all of these users actually were seen in transactions based upon the logs accessing this IP address. Pretty cool. But now, what if I want to flip it on its head a little bit and say what particular user was using what particular IPs, right? So let's go let's pick on a particular user here. By the way, notice I'm hitting the back button. Not a lot of cloud apps like the use of the back button. I'm thinking of ones like Concur and a few others, right? CloudApp Security does support the back button, and I know that seems silly, but there's so many apps that I wish would support it, and this one definitely does. So if let's go look at users, and we'll pick on this particular user here. And now we're looking at the patterns of this user, what they were using, 85 apps in use, and we can also look at the IP addresses that we saw associated with this particular user. Deep discovery capabilities, and what were those 85 apps? Well, here they are, right? And let's slide this down and just look at the bottom, 1 to 5s, right? And let's look at just the cloud storage ones, right? So we're looking at, from a 1 to 5 standpoint, these Mediafire was the more risky of the 4 that they were accessing. As we slide this up, here's those 4 that this particular user accessed and in what capacity, okay? Key takeaway, discovery, everything under this tab, all based on logs you're uploading. No API stuff, okay? All based on logs. Now, I mentioned the CloudApp catalog. What if you want to look at things that you haven't discovered yet? Even if you didn't upload a single log, the Cloud App Catalog is available to you. This is the 13,000 apps that we were talking about before. And you can start to filter down and say, I want to look for again, those bottom 1 to 5 I'll pick on, right? This will filter down. And I might want to look for things that just support multi-factor authentication. And let's look at, and notice I'm using the minus sign here. I know it's small, right? But we'll add in like minus sign HIPAA, right? This is how you can filter on a no. So we do something like that. We filter down, and we'll select again. Let's look at collaboration, right? So we have 3 here under collaboration, okay? Concept Board, Liferay, MindMeister. I haven't heard of any of these. But this is how you can start to run through, inspect, look at the properties of these things, mark them as sanctioned, request a score update, etc. Okay, so keep a lot of this in mind. So given the time frame, I don't want to spend all of our time talking about discovery, so I'm going to pivot now into the API stuff. So again, disclaimer, once you set up Cloud App Security, it's going to be basically empty, right? You need to get some logs in there. You need to make some API connections. So that's the only way you're going to make this product really look enticing or good to a customer. And if you want to start doing some live demos, the Acme tenant's not great for that, right? Because now if I want to do a demo, and I do this sometimes, right, with Azure Information Protection, I take a file, I create it, I have it get auto-classified as being confidential. I take that file, I put it into OneDrive, I put it into Box, and then I create a policy to trigger on that sensitive file being put outside of Office 365. You can't do any of that in Acme. You have to do that in your demos.microsoft tenant or in your personal live environment, okay? So what we're looking at here, and I have a few apps that I've disconnected. So ServiceNow, for instance, this one gets reclaimed every 7 days, which is why this is red. But here's the idea, right? These are apps that I have made an API connection to. And if you're wondering, how do I make those API connections? Great question. Cloud App Security, as of 2 days ago, I believe, got migrated onto docs.microsoft. This is great news for anyone who's been wondering, when is this actually going to get moved over? This is great stuff, right? So under deploy, enable API connectors. Just want you to know, because I'm not going to cover a lot of this, right? How do you connect Box to Cloud App Security, right? And great breakdown. Here's screenshots of how to do all this stuff. Again, Box for business, not personal Box, okay? So this is a enterprise grade license. Now, you can get a free dev environment, by the way, and I left links in the deck that you guys will get based on, and I can show you right here. Again, pivoting slightly, but I think this is important. When we talk about developer accounts that you connect into Box, if your organization doesn't already maintain environments here, this is a good thing to realize. So Office 365, of course, it includes OneDrive for Business, SharePoint Online, and Exchange Online. This will come natively with your demos.microsoft tenant that you set up. That's great. Box is free. It's fantastic. High-performing API. Salesforce dev account, free. Okta dev account, free. ServiceNow is free, but reclaims in 7 days. AWS, there's a free tier you can get for 12 months, and at the end of that free tier, obviously you're going to get charged for the VMs, but you can continue to use the environment. Google Apps and Dropbox, not free, so please kind of keep that in mind. If you can get these in your environment, it's great, especially Google Apps, right? Because even though it's a competing product to Office 365, a lot of customers use it, and a lot of customers want to look at, we want to be the platform that works across a lot of things, right? And we have great tie-in to Google Apps, but it is not free to make a dev account, at least the last time I checked, okay? So I'm going to come back in here. So when I talked about those 3 pieces of information, once you make these API connections, again, all documented for you to learn more about how to do that, what starts coming in? So let's look at the activities. This is a great place to start, right? So these are all the activities, and I have about 4,500 or so indexed in my environment. If we come look at the Acme tenant, just look at the scale difference, right? We have 129 million currently being indexed. So customers may ask you, well, how does this thing scale? Is there like a limit to how many activities? Not that I'm aware of. This thing scales pretty darn heavy. I only have about 5,000 in my environment, and I do quite a bit of testing. We're looking at logon activities, obviously, and this is, logon seem benign, but we use this logon information to determine if a user is logging in from different areas of the world in time frames that don't seem quite correct, right? And we call that impossible travel. So CloudApp Security, just like Azure Information Protection, does have a way to pick up on impossible travel through anomaly detection policies. Each of these line items, right, is going to show you a good breakdown of information. So here, this was a logon activity I did to CloudApp Security, and we see some more information. Again, there's much more on the back end than what you're seeing in the console, but this gives you a great representation. We also see information around this was a PC, this was running Windows 10, this was running Chrome 54, and just so you know, it's not a liar, right? I'm in Chrome right now on Windows 10 on a PC, right? So this is kind of that breakdown. I was doing a demo yesterday, and I logged in from my iPhone, right? So we come down here. I was changing a few settings. Now we're seeing mobile, iOS 10.0, and I wish I had it hooked up right now because I would love to prove to you that I am on 10.0, because if you guys have heard of Lookout, I have Lookout running on my mobile device, and it just gave me a warning that my device is outdated because I haven't updated to 10.1, and that's why this got captured as 10.0. So very accurate, and I was using Safari. So please it's a great wealth of information, but what's more important, I think, is the filtering. Now, we provide you a number of filters up here, and you really need to be comfortable with filters. And this is, as you get started, this can become confusing because every screen looks very similar. If I go to investigate and I go to files, right, this is going to look much the same. So be aware that you're in the file section, be aware that you're in the activities section. We'll come back, right? Because inevitably what happens, and I've seen this too often, and it's happened to me, is you'll be trying to do a demo for a customer and you're looking for a particular filter and you're like, wait, where'd that filter go? And you won't realize you're in the wrong section. So play around with this, get comfortable before you try to prove to the customer that you know everything, right? So I did this quick, right? But there's a filter up here, this basic, advanced, right? Basic shows you a few of the basic ones. I always go to advanced personally. I love the advanced filters. There's a lot you can filter on. And so what I'm going to do for you today is actually show you some of the key ones that you should be aware of when you want to investigate what you're getting in here. Now, I'm going to start with app. This is great. Now, just like normal syntax for like if you do any coding or scripting, right? There's some sort of a subject here, in this case app. There's an operator, equals, and then there's some sort of a property, right? And this is going to be based upon what you selected as the subject. The operator a lot of times can be equals or does not equal. There are others, right? So when we talk about, what's a good example of this? Maybe location. Yeah, well, I'll find a better example on the next screen, right? Typically, they're equals, does not equal, but there are a few that go beyond that, right? And then you select your apps. So we want to just look at box. Really easy. App equals box. Show me my box stuff, right? App equals box and app equals, we'll say OneDrive for Business. Okay, so now we're seeing box OneDrive for Business stuff. IPs, information about the user, what happened, who was doing that particular activity, right? So we filter down on a few things here. And I'm going to add in, CloudApp Security. Why not? Okay. And you'll see why in a second. Activity type. This one, I agree with a lot of folks. This needs to be kind of shored up a bit. This list is intelligent to the point of let me get rid of app for a second, and I do this drop down, right? This list contains every possible activity type for every app that I've connected in. I've connected in AWS, which is why you see it at the top of the list here. When you scroll down, it stops after a certain amount, and I don't know what the amount is, maybe 30 or so, which means you need to know exactly what you're looking for at the time you're looking for it. So I recommend always starting with app equals, and we'll say box, right? And then we'll do activity type. So now this list changes a bit. So this helps me understand a bit more what I'm looking for. So if I want to go look for a file, we'll say download, download file. Now we're looking at all the download files across my Box environment, right? Pretty cool stuff. And I see a couple that are pink. Oh, well, I don't know if it may be hard for you guys to see, but it's like a reddish hue here. Why were these categorized? Well, let's take a quick peek. If we open this up, I noticed that this was actually classified as a risky IP address, right? And why was it classified as risky? Because this was a download. Well, this happened to be a download that was coming from an anonymous proxy, specifically the Tor network. Now, how did we know about this? Because we talk about the Microsoft the intelligence security graph, right? We have lots of sensors out in the wild that's pulling information from all over the place, right? There was a recent botnet that was discovered that was using Xboxes to carry out its DDoS attack, right? You can be sure that Microsoft's indexing a lot of information about that. So this is how we get it. We bring Microsoft's intelligence right to the customer, and a great way to do this is categorization of IP addresses. So if we select IP address tag right here, you see we have a lot of tags that we're picking up: anonymous proxy, botnets, not just malicious ones, right? These are classified as Exchange Online. This one was classified as a command and control server. Some are classified as just coming from like OneNote Online or Yammer, right? In this case, Tor. So we select Tor, and now we're looking at the Tor access that took place, right? This is incredibly important to show your customer, because this is all part of the Microsoft security story, right? That we're trying to bring to this customer, and showing that we're not trying to keep certain pieces of information from you. And the customers say, well, it's great to know that you guys picked up that Tor access, but your competitor over there can block it. And it's like, well, we can too. So remember I mentioned at the beginning, conditional access, all this fun stuff that's part of EMS. We don't specifically do it today in Cloud App Security. We do it in other areas. And so this is all about blocking right at the front door, right? And so what I did prior to jumping on here is I went into Azure information protection, or I'm sorry, identity protection. I always screw that up. So this is my Azure identity protection environment. I created a sign-in risk policy for a particular user just for this demo, right? And I gave it a sign-in risk of medium, and I said block access, right? So I went to go try to log in into my environment using this particular user. And I don't know if it's hard for you to see down here, but I'm actually using the Tor browser right here. And I tried to log in, sign-in was blocked, right? We can do risk-based conditional access based on this information, but you have to have the broader discussion about how Azure Active Directory plays into this stuff, okay? Really, really important. And I'm tired of getting into compete scenarios, and I've just done this myself, so I'm trying to stress this to you. If you get into a one-on-one compete scenario with Cloud App Security versus the other guy, and they're talking about all this other stuff we do, you need to be able to position the larger EMS value prop, specifically stuff around E5, okay? Again, we don't have time in this call to talk more about that, but just be aware, right? We can block right at the front door just like anybody. Now, if you get past that front door, that's where Cloud App Security comes in. Cloud App Security picked it up. And actually in this Box environment, specifically to Box, Box actually does its best job to detect access coming in from a Tor exit node. It's not perfect, but it does its best. You can keep resetting the circuit, by the way, which, just if you're curious, here's the circuit I'm running through, and I guess I'm going through Netherlands every time. I can reset this circuit a number of times, and eventually I'll get by Box's kind of front door blocking, which means the next layer of this security model should be, let's put in some risk-based conditional access based upon coming in from a Tor exit node, a la identity protection. And if you get past that, let's have a way to pick it up based upon the activities that are being generated. And that's what happened here, okay? We bypassed both of those, got into Box, and we still picked it up. And I can do things like, I can go look at this particular user under Investigate Accounts, and I'm going to go to App is Box. Okay, and here's that particular user, right? I can go in and suspend this user because I saw that they got past my couple layers there, and I still don't like what they were doing, right? Or I can go look at their account settings and remove some of the more advanced permissions, right? But we give the ability to reach back into the application and do things like user suspensions, all right? What I want to talk next about, again, because we're running low on time, there's always too much things to say about this product. Let's look at files, right? So I just briefly showed you accounts. We talked a bit about activities. That third piece of information is files, right? And you see some files just like before. Some are highlighted in pink. They get highlighted because they triggered on a particular policy, right? So in my box environment, which, did I close that? No, here it is. All right. So here's a look at a file that's sitting in my box environment. It's a sample credit card number thing I was doing, right? CloudOps Security does DLP based on content inspection as well as the metadata of the file to determine if sensitive information is being put in the cloud, right? So this particular file, this PDF credit card numbers, let me grab this. All right, we're going to go back into files. We're going to open up our advanced filters, and we're going to say file name. It contains PDF credit card numbers. Here we are. Here's that file. Let's open this up, and we see this got triggered for a number of policies. Well, let's take a quick peek. Here's my credit card number content inspection. What got picked up, right? Here's those matches, Visa, MasterCard, American Express. We come back, right? Visa, MasterCard, American Express, they're getting picked up, all in here. An important note, by default, we hash out the sensitive information. You can turn this off, and when you're creating the policy, you can turn this off. But you notice there's a X's here, and there's also hash signs. The X's refer to the match that was found. The hash signs refer to any contextual information that might contain numbers, because by default, we treat all numbers as sensitive. So this is a cool feature to show. To say, hey, we're not, if you can see it here, we don't want to show you the next MasterCard one that wasn't explicitly picked up in this record. We'll hash this out for you automatically. But again, this can be turned off based on when you create the policy, but we recommend leaving it turned on for security reasons, right? So now I'm reviewing these matches. I can authorize it if this appears to be a particular, just a test file, right? Or I can actually put this thing right into quarantine. I can say, let's put it into an admin quarantine or a user quarantine. I don't have time to talk about what quarantining really means at length in each application, but in Box, it replaces the original file with a dummy file and moves that original file to a special folder that has no sharing permissions. And a user quarantine, the user still has access, and an admin quarantine, user loses access to that file, okay? So this is all about reaching back into the app to take a particular governance action. And I'd like to show apps like Box and others because I want the customer to understand that we don't just play with Office 365. This whole product is about playing with other things, including Office 365, okay? So I talked about policies, and actually, before I pivot, there's one other thing I want you to be aware of. CloudOps Security is aware of file tags in Azure Information Protection, which is incredibly cool. So now we can actually create policies based around classification labels as we see them in Azure Information Protection. So when you come into let me come into my AIP environment here. Here we go. See a lot of those labels, and I'm working with Jared here, and he's created a bunch of different labels. I'll have to talk to him later about not doing that. You can see Jared's labels right in here. Why is this important? Because this is kind of step one in an integration path for the rest of EMS, right? Customer classifies and protects documents. We can now see those documents, where they're going, what activities have taken place around this document, right? Let's assume for a second that this document was classified. I can go look at the view-related activities, and I can see all the activities that have been generated around this one file, right? Lots of previews, obviously, because I do demos with this file a lot, downloads, previews, etc. Who was doing it, when they were doing it, where they were doing it from. And this is a preview feature, by the way. You notice I'm in the activity log. This is coming very soon. Notice file tag is in the activity log. This is a preview feature that I got turned on in my tenant. Why is this cool? I can now look for all the activities around a particular tag type, right? I can look for everything around secret files. What has happened? Who's been doing what around all my secret files? Really cool stuff. Okay, I wish I had more time to talk about it, but I don't. I have 5 minutes to run through policies. So we're going to jump into policies, and I want you to be aware of just the basics of this stuff. The idea is, if you get familiar with filtering and activities, files, and accounts, policies will be incredibly easy for you, and you'll take to them like a fish to water, right? So let me come in here for a second. Create So you notice there's 5 different policy types: activity policy, anomaly detection policy, app discovery policy, cloud discovery, anomaly detection. For this session, I'm going to focus on 1. Activities obviously are triggering based upon activities being done in the environment. So you set those thresholds, but you can also say, if we see this activity being done multiple times over a short period of time, then trigger. File policy I want to talk more about because of the time frame that I have, and because it's probably the more complicated of the ones to configure. Obviously, name and description, very self-explanatory. Policy severity, category, self-explanatory. There's 2 gray boxes though. All right, this top gray box is all about filtering based on metadata. You want to filter as intelligently as you can based upon the descriptive data. And edit and preview results is super powerful for this. So what we do is we click edit and preview results, and this is showing me all my files. What I want to do now is I want to look for anything that has an app of Box, right? And this will filter down. And this is a great way to do a sanity check based upon what you're configuring. Access level equals external, right? So now I'm looking at just files that are being externally shared. We'll say that the extension type is, I don't even know if these have extension types because I'm in the fake tenant. No, they don't. Okay, let's go back to my tenant really quick. Oh, come on, don't go sluggish on me now. Ah, you're killing me. Okay, so extension type. The idea is doc, you can add multiple extension types, PDF. This fabricated data doesn't have extension types. Again, it's fabricated data, so poor demo. Again, this is why you want your own lab environment to supplement the Acme tenant. File type equals, we'll do document, right? Show me just documents that are externally shared in Box, okay? There's a lot more you can do. You get the idea. We'll save those filters. The second gray box here is all about content inspection. When you enable content inspection, it copies out the file to CloudOps Security, and then you're going to pick up, and then you can inspect it based upon a number of pre-built algorithms that we have. Notice I said algorithms and not patterns, because these are not just simple regex matching patterns. We actually do some validation and checking in other databases around some of these, right? I can't share too much about what's going on the back end because that's proprietary information, but if a customer asks, is this just simple regex matching? No, it's not, okay? Home addresses, passports, social security numbers, the usual suspects are in here. This list will continue to grow over time, right? But the customer says, well, I have a special file that I want to match, or like I have a special unique string that, you know, I have a player database, and each player gets a particular code like FF dash, you know, 61456, and they all start with FF dash, right? So this is a great use of creating a regular expression, right? So you can come down here and say include files that match a custom expression. We enable match regular expression, and we can put our regex pattern right in there. Obviously, you don't have time to talk about how to build regular expressions, but I do recommend using something like regexpal. If you are not familiar, just use regexpal. And slight disclaimer, you can use them to build here. Only non-capturing groups are supported. So if anyone who knows what regex is about, that will make sense. Anyone who doesn't, don't worry about it. You can look it up later. Okay. So we've created our content inspection. We can specify the number of alerts. I'm talking fast because we have 2 minutes. How frequently do we want to be alerted? Unlimited, 500, 100, etc. Send it as an email, as a text message. Text message is a great way, by the way, if you're doing a demo. Create a file or create one that sends a text message so that you'll get a little alert on your phone, and then you can show the customer, and it's kind of a cool demo. And then there's a governance action. Don't do governance actions until you're absolutely ready. Always start with alerts, because governance actions actually reach back into the app to do something, right? So for OneDrive for Business, or actually in our case, right, we were talking about Box in this particular scenario. If we detect based on the thresholds that we set above, if we see something like this, automatically put it in a quarantine. Automatically notify the last file editor, right? You have a number of actions you can take. So it's not just about giving the customer the ability to do manual activities in their SaaS environment. They can also do automated actions, and that's the real power here, is basically a way for a customer to gain full visibility into what's going on in their SaaS environment, which has been a huge blocker for cloud adoption, as well as the ability to control it with security controls without impacting user productivity, okay? So with that said, we just hit 10. I'm sorry for going all the way to the end, Nick. I'm sure there's questions, but I'll pass it back to you.
Actually, we got most of the questions answered on the side there, so we're good to go. But hey, folks, I just want to remind you, we talked about a ton of resources today, and we've captured most of those in the form of blogs, and we've actually shared those links on our Yammer group for the community in the last couple of weeks. So if you're not part of that Yammer group, go join it. I posted the link to it in our messages pane. We talked about how to use the demos tool. We talked about getting started on Cloud App Security. We shared links to some of the updated trainings and the docs.microsoft site and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to go deeper on Cloud App Security in any way, there's a ton of resources that we've made available to you out there. And I know that Mike is showing on the screen here too some links that he put in as well. These are in the slide deck that's available for download. We're going to make the recording available later today as well. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close out the call and just say thank you. Mike, thank you. This was a fantastic overview of the Cloud App Security. It's a very powerful tool. And we'll see you all next month when we're going to cover Azure Active Directory Premium P2 with one of our cloud solution architects as well. So thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next month.